Thanks for coming out. My name is Steve Ballage, and I'm with Will County Tea Party Alliance. And we're here to learn. We're going to learn all about our candidates. I think after this is done, anybody that's on the fence of who they're going to vote for or whatever, they're going to have a real good idea. So pay close attention, because we have some real pointed questions to ask. The Will County Tea Party is the host of this event, so I wanted to introduce the Will County Tea Party Alliance founders. It's myself, Steve Ballage, Vivian Porter, Tim Perlitis, and Debbie Perlitis. So I'm going to turn it over to Vivian, because we have a lot of people to thank, our co-sponsors. And when you listen to their names, you'll realize this encompasses probably about 80% of the different groups in Will County.
Yes, it does. It takes a lot of people to put on an event like this, so I just wanted to thank the Will County Republican Organization. Is anyone here from that group? Thank you. Homer Township Republican Organization, New Lenox Township Republican Organization, DuPage Township Republican Organization, Wheatland Township Republican Organization, Lockport Township Republican Organization, Plainfield Township Republican Organization, Illinois Family for Action, URF, the United Republican Fund, how about DuPage Tea Party, Vermont Tea Party, URF's Women's Network, and the Conservative Committeeman Project, in the RNHA, Will County Republican National Hispanic Assembly. On Target Radio, also, Will County Republican Women's Association, and we just wanted to say thank you to everyone for helping us put this event together. It takes a lot of money to put events like this together, so I am going to pass the can later, just in a few moments. So if you feel so inclined, we would appreciate a donation just to cover costs and to cover costs for future events. There will also be a straw poll. Everybody, you might have seen this when you were coming in. There's a little yellow card. So these will be collected at the end of the evening in the back. Illinois Review is sponsoring the straw poll, so please drop those off there. And all the candidates have tables up in front, so please feel free to take your signs up there. And also, we are videoing this event, so please look at the Homer Lockport Tea Party. Those are the little business cards, has that website. And our friend Grant Spooner is also videoing, and all you have to do is go to YouTube and search WC for Will County Videos 1, and you'll also be able to see the video. So it'd be great for you to pass this on to your friends, you know, who couldn't make it here, to help them make their decision for the election. Thank you.
So I take it we're all ready to learn a lot about these candidates, right? So God bless them, and we'll start by standing and saying the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you remain standing, we're going to go ahead and do the national anthem. Would you be the choir with us here? Appreciate that.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleam, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous flight o'er the we watched were so gallantly streamed, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. God bless America.
You notice they saved the best for last up here, folks. You just bow your heads. We're going to say a quick prayer for this evening. Lord, I just want to thank you for this evening. I want to thank you that as Americans we're able to get together in a representative republic and elect our officials, God. I just pray for this election season that you'll give the candidates wisdom, give us as citizens wisdom as we choose our leaders here in Illinois and abroad, God. And we just ask your blessing for this great country in your name. Amen. All right, folks. Thank you for coming out. This is our second gubernatorial forum. Did anybody attend our first about 4 years ago at the office? Wow. Thank you. We appreciate that. Actually, we have 3 former participants here this evening as well. 2 of the candidates that are going to be on the stage were running back then, and then the MC as well was running for governor. So we got some old friends coming back, not just you guys, but them as well. So all of the Republican candidates were contacted over the last 2 months regarding this event. And I just want to thank Senator Brady, Senator Dillard, and Treasurer Rutherford for making tonight a priority and participating this evening. We're all excited to learn more about you, your campaigns, and your positions on the issues. For the record, Mr. Rauner was invited numerous times, but declined our invitation. Our MC for this evening is an entrepreneur, a writer, a former Republican candidate for governor, and a radio talk show host for WLS Chicago. He is a senior fellow at the Illinois Policy Institute and serves on the boards of directors for both the Disabled Patriot Fund and Freedom to Learn Illinois. He's a hometown boy that received his BA from Northwestern University and his Juris Doctorate from Loyola University Chicago School of Law. And then I recently, does anybody get Dan's Facebook post? Yeah, okay, and he's also a bull rider. Did anybody see him on the electronic bull? Yeah, so we're going to add that into his bio too. So we're happy to have him here tonight. So please give it up for Dan Proft.
I'm really impressed that Tim Corlitis could pronounce Juris Doctorate. It's my pleasure to be here. As Tim mentioned, I participated in the forum 4 years ago as a candidate. I couldn't cut it, but they felt sorry for me, so they let me back to be the moderator this evening. And it promises to be a very lively debate, as it was 4 years ago. And so let's get right to it. The sponsoring organizations have been introduced. You're familiar with some of the candidates. I think you're going to be more familiar with the 3 candidates tonight. And so let me introduce the candidates, briefly go through the guidelines, and then we'll get right to questions, because as always with these things, there are more questions to ask than there is time to ask them. So if I could just have Senator Bill Brady come on out. Senator. Representing the Bloomington area, Senator Kirk Dillard, representing the Hinsdale area. And State Treasurer Dan Rutherford from Pontiac. The 4th chair, as Tim alluded to, was for Bruce Rauner, so whoever wants to do their Clint Eastwood impersonation first, you have a prop that's set up nicely for that. Just quickly, let me go over the guidelines of the forum. Questions, we have 3 panelists who I'll introduce shortly. We also have a couple sponsors who are going to ask questions, and gentlemen, feel free to take a seat. There'll be some questions posed to all the candidates that they'll all have a chance to respond to, and one candidate-specific question that is posed to each of the candidates. Response times for the questions, or for the answers to the questions, will vary, and I'll announce the response times allotted for each question prior to the questions being asked. I'm going to facilitate a discussion. For those that were in attendance at the forum last go-around, we offer some rebuttal time, and it's really kind of free form to make it more interactive, so it's not one of these insufferable League of Women Voters debates that's overly structured. So and I know they're all disassociating from the insufferable League of Women Voters debate. That's okay. I own it. My opinions do not reflect anyone on stage. So we're going to, if somebody wants to respond, we're going to offer a little bit of rebuttal time to make it interactive, and we'll just do that at my discretion. So let's have some fun, and let me introduce the panel, and let's get right to the questions. Moving from left to right, Margie Benucci. Margie, raise your hand. She's a Plainfield Village trustee, and she's also the Plainfield Township Republican chairman. The sartorial, splendid gentleman, Steve Ballage, is a Will County board member and one of the leaders of the Will County Tea Party Alliance, of course. And the lovely and talented Raquel Mitchell is a Wheatland Township trustee and a conservative activist. For the first question, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. We will start with Senator Brady, and Margie Benucci will ask the first question. Margie.
Okay. In a recent Chicago Fox News report, the state of Indiana says that at least 31 Illinois-based employers have recently moved 2,700 jobs to the Hoosier state. Detail your #1 option in stopping the job exodus from Illinois.
Well, I wish it was as simple as just #1. In fact, it's worse than that. Moody's last week rated Illinois 50 amongst all 50 states in the forecast for job growth. I think there's 3 levels of reforms that we need to see happen. I'm a businessman in Illinois, and I'm going to be here either way. But if we're going to attract more business investment to Illinois, we've got to make Illinois look more attractive in terms of financially. The first thing we did to do that was pass pension reform. I was one of the lead authors. We were able to pass reform that will save over $160 billion for the taxpayers over the next 30 years. In addition to that, it'll fully fund erasing $30 billion in additional debt. It helped our bond ratings, and it sent a message to the business community that we're serious. Which leads to the second thing. We have to make sure that the income tax increase rolls off. The Democrats opposed a 67% income tax increase. It's devastated the business climate. If we're going to let that roll off, we have to have a savings for pension reform in the first year. If you didn't vote for that or didn't support it, you were giving the Democrats an argument to keep that tax. Lastly, we've got to live within our means, and as governor, I'll work with the legislature not only to pass a balanced budget, to manage a balanced budget. The second thing we've got to do is bring business reforms into compliance. My businesses just recently, my managers came forward with budgets, and one of the most horrific numbers in that budget is workers' compensation costs. We've got to tame workers' compensation costs, not at the expense of the worker, but understanding that causation and other healthcare needs need to be addressed so that people can afford to invest in Illinois. And we also have to stop this debate on minimum wage. We have to freeze the moratorium on the minimum wage, let the federal wage catch up. Then lastly, as governor of this state, we need someone who will go out and market the wonderful resources this state has to offer. We'll be the #1 marketing team in the nation. In addition to that, we need to send a message, which is why I've laid out a platform to actually eliminate the personal income tax. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to look at states like Texas and Florida, who are in the top 5 job-producing forecasts. They have no personal income tax. As governor of the state, I'll put us on a path to eliminate it.
Senator Dillard.
Thank you. And first, before I answer the question, I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. Fortunately, it's not snowing. That's a good thing. And it's great. I told some of the students of Plainfield High School today that I was happy to be in this high school, although the tragedy of the tornado that struck this place, I work with my friend Senator Petka, who's here, but this is a great facility, and thank you all for being here. Indiana versus Illinois. My plan is to make Illinois a destination economy for people that create jobs. And how am I going to do that? A number of ways. The first thing that we need to do is pass a constitutional amendment that requires the legislature, certified by the Auditor General, to pass a balanced budget in Springfield, or the legislature doesn't get paid. This state is overtaxing, we certainly overregulate, and then last but not least, we continue to have a cadence of corruption. I know of businesses that are in Iowa, for example, that go to Iowa because they don't like the drip, drip, drip of the corruption that has taken place in the state of Illinois. I have said that we need to establish a panel, very much like we rewrote our criminal code in Illinois, a panel of business people, very few politicians, business people, and tax experts, the Taxpayers Federation, to completely look at every tax that is killing job creation in the state of Illinois. And I've also said that my Lieutenant Governor, Representative Jill Tracy from Quincy, whose family employs a couple of thousand people in Illinois, she and her family own a company called Dot Foods, big food redistributor. Jill's going to be known as the repealer in state government, and she's going to go throughout the state taking testimony and meeting with family farmers and small businesses and large businesses to figure out what regulations are stifling economic development here. And just to close, the grass is not always greener on the other side, and I've met with Governor Daniels, but Navistar, we moved in my district from Fort Wayne, Indiana, back to Illinois through good creative methods. The Navistars, primarily the engineering department, from Indiana to here, several thousand jobs sucked from Indiana back to Illinois, where a company like Navistar begins. But it all goes to making us what I call a destination economy for people that create jobs.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for putting this together for us tonight. As your governor, I'm going to do three things for job creation here in the state of Illinois. Number one, as your governor, I appoint every single director of a state agency. I appoint all the boards and commissions. I'm going to bring in people that are going to be talented and very good at energy and nuclear safety and aging and corrections and education. But before I sign their authorization paper, they're going to sit before me in the governor's office on the second floor in Springfield and look me in the eye and commit to me that beyond doing their job in the core of their agency, they're going to do everything they can to create a job and retain a job in the state of Illinois. There's a gentleman right up here, I talked to you a little bit ago about your trucking company. Part of the problems that we have in Illinois today in creating jobs and retaining jobs is our own bureaucrats within state government. Number two, my Lieutenant Governor, Steve Kim, as I announced in his appointment to run with me, is going to be in charge of the Governor's Office of Job Creation and Retention. They're going to be the office that's going to be within the appropriation, no further funds, to be able to be the ombudsman, to help navigate when we have a small business that has a problem with an agency within state government. And I'll give you a very quick example. When I was over in Kane County and I talked to the florist, she went online, one person, her company, she went online to pay her sales tax at the end of the quarter. She went all the way through and couldn't get through on the servers to the state government Department of Revenue. The next morning she got through. She got a penalty. Her recourse was the fact that she had to pay her penalty. Under a Rutherford administration, she'll be able to work with the Governor's Office of Job Creation and Retention. And as I told you in point one, I'll whistle in the Director of Revenue, look him or her in the eye, and explain to them that they just made it harder for this woman to keep going and building on her business. Number three, I will be the Chief Marketing Officer of the state of Illinois. Aside from being your Chief Executive, I'm also going to be the Chief Marketing Officer. So when Chris Christie comes flying in from New Jersey, or Rick Perry comes parachuting in from Texas, remember that? Okay, I'm going to be the guy that's going to look them in the eye and explain to them how good Illinois is with jobs, with regards to vocational technical training, with regards to power, and with regards to transportation. I'm going to be the Chief Marketing Officer, and those are the three things that I'm going to do to help put Illinois back in a place that's going to have a much better private sector job opportunity.
Thank you. All right, we're off and running. Next question comes from panelist Steve Ballage. It's on K through 12 education, and each candidate will have a minute 30 to respond, and the first respondee will be Senator Dillard.
Advance Illinois has reported that nearly 2/3 of Illinois' fourth graders do not read at a fourth grade level. What would you do in the area of K to 12 to reform to improve the education being provided at the K through 12 level in Illinois?
Thank you. Steve, didn't recognize you in a suit, so it's nice to see you all dressed up here today. I have a written plan, and anyone is entitled to read it, and I would love your input, called Making Illinois a Best-in-Class Education State. And it goes hand in glove with respect to my plan to make us a destination economy for job creators. In fact, I urge you to go to my website. If you have a little insomnia problem, look at my 30 tips for a thriving economy. It's there. I have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I am the son of a high school teacher who is a professional teacher for more than 40 years. I live and breathe education every day with my 12-year-old and my 10-year-old. And whether it's issues, and I know many of you are concerned about the Common Core, which Bruce Rauner will hear tonight to talk about how he is one of the major funders and the drivers of the Common Core in the United States. But I live and breathe this with my children. And my vision of Illinois is to have, for my children, your grandchildren, our families, our kids to be 10 minutes from us, not 10 hours, to have the jobs that they require. Every day, it's technology in the classroom. Science and technology and mathematics is one of the things that I drive home in my best-in-class education program. But it takes everybody to be involved in their schools, and obviously we need competition and creativity in our education system. But I have a written plan in best-in-class education. Live and breathe this stuff every day, and be happy to talk more further with you. And I know there are educators here tonight, and I would love to have your input. Thank you.
Thank you. Treasurer Rutherford.
You know, I'm going to somewhat preface this that education being extremely important throughout either tonight or throughout the campaign. There could be a number of areas that we're going to talk about that are important of government service and assistance, whether it's those with developmental disabilities or mental illnesses and substance and drug abuse. Bottom line, as your governor, I'm going to look at all of these things from a logical business standpoint on an investment. And Steve, to the direct question that you asked, I think that the area that we have been woefully lacking at here in the state of Illinois is pre-K. And the amount of this lack of assistance in pre-K and helping a child get prepared to enter into the grade school and having the assistance program so that they can be better prepared when they get there. And then you also look at what kind of assistance programs our schools are now taking on that haven't come from the families before. And what kind of investments and assistance we can have there. It's going to be an analysis on how we prepare a younger person as they prepare to move into even the grade school ages today.
There's no question this is a serious problem, and it ties to jobs and the workforce. As I travel around the state talking to businesses, I can't tell you how many of them tell me how hard it is to find a qualified worker, particularly at an entry-level position. But I'll tell you, there's three things that I think are important. First, I'm going to abolish the State Board of Education. I'm going to do it because it's a bureaucratic nightmare, and we don't need Springfield telling parents and teachers in school districts what best fits the needs of their students. Secondly, I'm going to bring parity to education funding. Over the last 10 years, the Democrats have finagled a way in which the Chicago School District receives a $1 billion bump over the rest of the school districts in this state. That means our property taxes are higher. It means our children suffer. We need to bring parity and equity when it comes to funding education, and under the Brady administration, we're going to demand it. And thirdly, in the worst performing school districts, we're going to give parents a choice. We need vouchers in some of those poor performing school districts. This is not at the expense of public education. I'm a business person. Every day I compete, my business gets better. The same can happen for education. We can build a stronger public school system through competition in those poor performing districts and give parents and children a choice.
Next question comes from panelist Raquel Mitchell. It's on pensions. Each candidate has 2 minutes to respond, and we'll start with Treasurer Rutherford.
We all know that there has been great debate here in Illinois related to our state's funding of pensions. Please explain your respective votes or position on the recently passed public sector pension legislation.
Great. I did not have the opportunity to vote on it, having left my friends in the Illinois General Assembly to be the state treasurer. When it was announced that it looked like it was going to be coming around about Thanksgiving, I took the long weekend and had my staff go into the Capitol and pull legal briefs and memos and so forth so I could at least have a even greater understanding of it. I came out shortly after that and I opposed the legislation. I think that the legislation that was presented is going to be unconstitutional. I do stand and have been very public about this, and you can go back on all the videotapes of the programs I've given. I think that we need to have a very fair but constitutional resolution to this issue. And I don't believe the bill that was presented was, and I'm going to wait and see what the Supremes finally rule.
Thank you. Senator Brady.
You know, I've been talking about pension reform for 12 years. Didn't have great eyesight to have to see the cliff that was coming, particularly when politicians were borrowing against the system, taking holidays and other things. And we reached a point where we had $100 billion in unfunded liabilities. I thought it was ironic that the day we passed it was the same day a federal judge ruled that Detroit could actually file bankruptcy and leave their employees with less than 20 cents on the dollar when it came to their pensions. I've worked hard to bring pension reform to the people of Illinois. If it didn't occur, our resources, 26% of the resources we have are going to be eaten up. That means less money for classrooms, roads, health services, and human services. We worked hard to come up with a bill that I argue is constitutional. It protects everything everybody's earned to date, but it changes the way it grows after they retire. I think that's fair. We can't afford 3% compounded increases each and every year, but we are protecting what they've earned. And frankly, it's not fair, because those people have paid every dime into the system that they were asked to pay. But it's the legislature who passed budgets, legislators who voted for borrowing and budgets, and governors who did so, that caused the problem. I didn't vote for any of those budgets. In fact, you'll find it hard to believe that George Ryan is the only governor who actually fully funded the statutory pension obligation all 4 years. This is an abuse that's been in practice for a number of years, and it needs to be corrected. We passed meaningful reform, $160 billion. There's those that can say it's unconstitutional. What's their solution? Ladies and gentlemen, we needed a solution. When we issued bonds after we passed this, we saved 0.5% interest on those bonds because those in the legislature who had the courage to vote for it did so. It was the toughest vote many of us have ever taken in our life, but it was the right move. It was the first step in moving Illinois forward, and I'm proud of it, and I do believe it will be held constitutional.
Thank you. Senator Dillard.
Thank you. There is no doubt that the state of Illinois needs major pension reform, and I've voted for some. Let me begin with the process. The bill was drafted over Thanksgiving weekend. There were some of us, I saw Senator Oberweis here, one of the few members of the General Assembly that I'm sure actually read the bill. I was not part of the pension system or the process like Senator Brady was. And I said, look, if you're going to draft this thing over Thanksgiving weekend, if there's one thing we learned from the Obamacare mess, when Nancy Pelosi says, trust us, vote for this 350-page bill without reading it, I didn't want that to happen again in Illinois. So I had a little problem with the Thanksgiving holiday. I also said that we should have in the Senate, because the House had these kinds of hearings, had a couple of days of committee of the whole. I would have liked to have heard from the Illinois Public Policy Institute, and on the other hand, maybe those who are affected, a retired teacher from downstate Illinois, to actually have a full hearing of the state Senate. But here's the biggest problem I have with the bill that passed. Pat Quinn gets $1.3 billion, and he gets no restrictions on how he's going to spend that. I thought we should have required him to spend down and pay down with that the state's $6-8 billion of unpaid bills that are hanging around in operational debt. And secondly, we should have said, Governor Quinn, with the rest of it, you're going to help roll back that 67% income tax increase the Democrats shoved down our throat. And then lastly, I know Pat Quinn. He's going to use that savings to expand the government, to expand welfare. That's what he's going to do with the $1.3 billion in savings. And then last but not least, the Treasurer touched on the constitutionality. We're going to find out whether it's constitutional or not from the Supreme Court. And there's a big clause in there that gives the state some police powers. But I just read a piece by the Associated Press where the state's foremost constitutional law expert, Professor Ann Lucene from the John Marshall Law School, who was there as part of that constitutional convention in 1970, said this thing is of dubious constitutionality, and it will be very hard to uphold it.
Thank you very much. We're finally going to break the seal on a little rebuttal time. Senator Brady wants to rebut something I said. We'll give you 30 seconds.
Thanks. With all due respect to Senator Dillard, every issue, every reform in the pension bill had been drafted and discussed over the last 4 years. Any legislator who wanted to study it should have been studying it all along. And not that Senator Dillard didn't, but to say that you didn't know what was in it, it wasn't Obamacare. It was something that we have debated and discussed over the last 4 years. And if we could have tied Governor Quinn's hands, we would have, but we can't. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't provide the $1 billion+ in savings, it just gives Governor Quinn another reason to extend the income tax. This was the first step that we had to make happen.
Thank you. And now we'll have a question from one of tonight's debate sponsors, Illinois Family Action, and we have Dave Smith with that question. We'll start with, I've lost my place. We'll start with Senator Brady.
Okay. Good evening, gentlemen. While the state of Illinois has recently redefined marriage, the state will continue to confront legal questions on this matter. Central to some of those questions is what constitutes the best interest of a child. Do you think a happily married mother and father remains the ideal environment in which to raise a child, or do you believe that alternative parenting arrangements are now equally ideal? Also, as governor, would you support or oppose amending the Illinois Constitution to define marriage as the union of one man and one woman? Thank you.
The answer to your question is yes, I do think that the best interests of a child are important, and I do think raised by one man and one woman is in the best interest of a child. I oppose civil unions because I thought it was the next step was marriage. I am a person who believes in traditional marriage, and I think it's been a pillar of our tradition and of our society. And I have in the past voted for and supported constitutional amendments which would have maintained it. I will also tell you that I think this law becomes a legal quagmire. I think there's a whole host of issues from religious freedoms and First Amendment freedoms that are going to become very complicated for us as we deal with this law. And I'm regretful for that, but we'll have to deal with that as it moves down the pipe.
Thank you. Senator Dillard.
Thank you. I do believe that the best way to raise a child is with the traditional male and female mother and father, and said so. Many of you were in the rotunda of the state capitol when Dave had his rally. So, Dave, the answer to that question is yes. Obviously, the best way to raise a child is with a mother and a father. With respect to the constitutional amendment, I voted no on gay marriage on the Senate floor, but unlike Bruce Rauner, who said throw it to a constitutional amendment, I said, we should probably know what the statewide electorate believes on the question. So we'll see what happens on the constitutional amendment. But I do believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. I voted no on the civil unions bill, like Senator Brady said, pointing out that I did believe that there would be litigation, and there are litigation cases over civil unions, and Governor Quinn stopped allowing groups like the Archdiocese of Rockford to do foster care and adoption. And when you do that, everybody wants to feel great about everything, but somebody gets hurt, and in that case, a child gets hurt because the Rockford Archdiocese or whomever can no longer offer foster care or adoption services. So that's my answer to it, and I was happy to address this in front of the entire state capitol in the rotunda. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I wish we could have a magic wand to make everything perfect for kids. You know how many people are divorced? How many people are out of wedlock? I think we need to be very sensitive about this kind of a discussion. You know, is it perfect to have a world that's got a man and a woman that's going to be rearing their natural-born child? Sure it is. But that isn't a perfect world we live in. I think the most important thing we need to do is look at what we can do to make sure that little boys and girls have a nurtured home, have people who love them, and have people that care for them. And if it can be a married mommy and daddy, God bless. But if it isn't because they weren't in wedlock, or they're divorced, or they're same-sex, and they've got themselves a good, loving, nurtured family, then I'm happy for that child. And no, I do not. Thank you. And no, I do not support amending the Constitution of the state of Illinois.
For the next question, we'll go back to our panelists. Margie has a question on Obamacare and the state's Medicaid program. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer, and we will start with Senator Dillard.
Illinois was one of the early adopters of Obamacare, setting up a state exchange expanding Medicaid. Was this a good idea? If not, what will you do as governor to blunt the impact of Obamacare on Illinois? In your answer, please indicate whether or not you would maintain the Obamacare Medicaid expansion that has reportedly extended Medicare coverage to 342,000 more Illinoisans.
Well, I wouldn't have had a statewide exchange, and I voted, I think, as Senator Brady did, no on the new Obamacare Medicaid expansion because, number one, we can't afford it, and later on down the line, if one of the three of us is governor, we get a balloon note for about $4 billion. You know, I go back a long way on the issue of Obamacare, and myself and Congressman Peter Roskam, who was my seatmate as then State Senator Peter Roskam, stood up on the floor when Barack Obama was a state senator and tried to pass something that was a $4 or a $5 billion universal health care, is what Barack called it. But I stood up on the floor and helped with Peter Roskam kill Obamacare here in Illinois. And I called it socialized medicine. And I still remember the president coming over and he said, geez, you know, that's an inflammatory term, socialized medicine. And I looked at him. I then looked at Senator Obama and I said, look, it is socialized medicine. And if I wanted to live in a place with socialized medicine, I'd move to Italy.
First of all, I would not have supported the expansion of the program here in the state of Illinois. This is one of those typical things that the federal government hangs a whole bunch of baskets of carrots out in front of you, and the donkey runs down the aisle and tries to eat them. And by the time it's all done, somebody else is going to have to pay for them down the road. And so no, I would not have supported that at that time. With regards to the exchanges, I mean, they tried to do it. It's been, how's that going for you out in D.C.? And then you look at it here in the state of Illinois. Now, it is what it is. It is the law. If they change it in Washington, then that's a different story. But as long as it happens to be the law, and I'm the governor, I'm going to make sure that we do it in the most efficient way possible. And the way I sense it probably will be an exchange that we would have to put together here within the state of Illinois, because I don't trust those guys out in D.C.
Thank you. Senator Brady.
I did oppose the implementation of Obamacare, and I think it's devastated our working environment. I can't tell you how many businesses I've talked to around the state that are just scared to death of what it's going to cost them. They're not willing to expand, and that sole issue alone. And we need jobs, so we need someone who's going to stand up for it. As governor of the state, I'm going to appeal to the federal government for our rights as a state, to set us aside, and let us as a state decide how we're going to work with the private sector to make sure our citizens have the best quality of health care and affordable insurance. We've got to take back our state's rights, which is one of the reasons I sponsored a resolution in the Illinois Senate to honor the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. I'm tired of Washington, D.C., whether it be the Bureau of Education or whether it be Obamacare and health care, telling states like Illinois what we have to do. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got to take back our state. As governor of the state, I'm going to do everything I can to give us back the right to manage our own health care in the state of Illinois.
Okay, the next question comes from panelist Steve Ballage. It is about the disparity in private sector and public sector compensation. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer, and we'll start with Treasurer Rutherford.
A few years ago, there was a story in the Joliet Herald detailing how Joliet City employees, when including their health care and pension benefits, made nearly 3 times the median household income in Joliet. We see the same at the state level, where state employees make more money than their private sector counterparts. In addition, they enjoy much better benefits and virtually absolute job security. In this public sector, private public sector environment, how would you address the compensation disparity? If so, if you were in favor of it, how would you address it as governor?
Treasurer Rutherford.
See, I want to make sure I understand the question. How would I address the disparity between public employees and private sector employees?
Pretty much, and how come the amount, well, basically, how come public sector employees don't lose their jobs, make way more money, have way more benefits, so they have way more job security?
Okay.
And what would you do about it?
Well, that's a lot of questions. Let me try to nick away at these. First of all, some of these employees in state government have a negotiated contract. And that's the same as in some cases in the private sector, have a negotiated contract. So one, I happen to be the kind that believes you have a contract and you fulfill it. With regards to private sector and public sector positions, I understand the intent and I'm going to respond to it, but one thing I think we also have to realize that public sector employees aren't quite the same in regards to opportunities that private sector employees can have. For the candidate that comes out and says, I want to run government like a business, I do too. But when I was vice president of Service Master Corporation here down the road at Downers Grove, I had the opportunity to have profit sharing. And I had the opportunity to have stock incentive. Now, I realize that isn't the case in all private sector employees, but you don't have that all over. I think maybe the best way to respond to you, Steve, is what I did in the Treasurer's office. Before I brought on people in the Treasurer's office for either current positions or new positions or consolidated positions, we did a salary comparison. So when we brought on people, we compared an equal position in the private sector, and that's how we determine salaries.
Thank you. Senator Brady.
Well, as a business person, I do know that you're only as good as the people you work with. Your business can't be good without good people, so it's also important that you have a high morale with those folks. But I'll tell you, as governor of the state, I'll be the one negotiating those contracts. And we need to make sure that the governor isn't vindictive about those negotiations like Governor Quinn. I mean, he's literally threatening 20% reductions across the board on families that were trying to live paycheck to paycheck. And then he turns around and gives them a 4% increase per year. We need someone who's going to be honest with them, who understands that there's got to be parity, that if we can hire someone in the private sector to do that job, and the people of Illinois are better served by it, we need to respect the rate we can do that at. So as governor, you've got to understand there are options, keep morale high, pay your people in parity. But we also have to understand that we have to judge ourselves to some extent, not only by the private sector, by other places in this nation, other states, which is why we helped usher through in one of the pension negotiations a change from giving people 100% of their health care in their retirement years to somewhat of a copay. So we passed a law under our leadership that said 100% isn't in sync with what's going on in the private sector. So we asked them to make a contribution, not something they couldn't afford, but a contribution that was in parity with other states and with the private sector. So we've got to have policies that bring us closer to parity, and as governor, I'll make sure we do that.
Thank you. Senator Dillard.
Thank you. The best way to close that is to make sure that we have a robust private sector job creation We are overregulated, and my job as governor, the single thing I am most focused upon is creating an environment where we can do better than being rated 50th in economic outlook in the United States of America. As the Pew Charitable Trust said, that's our outlook coming forward. This is a great state, folks. We're the capital of the Midwest, and nobody should be out economically performing us. This is where I get to use my I'm tested and prepared moment. You know, I was the chief of staff for the last clean and competent governor of this state and negotiated those contracts. And we downsized the state government. We had thousands of fewer employees at the end than at the beginning. And we also, believe it or not, and it was a good time, had an unemployment rate well below the national average. When you're negotiating these contracts with state employees, you can't give them or negotiate more than you can afford. You must look at the benefit levels of other comparable state governments throughout the United States. But Steve, the best way to parody that, and no one in government, I don't expect it, I'm sure these gentlemen don't, you shouldn't get paid the same in government as you're going to make in the private sector. There is a public service component that, whether it's a teacher, expecting to make what you're going to make in the private sector. So let's bring the private sector up. Let's look at what we can live within our means. And I've been there and I've done it before. Left $1.5 billion in the state treasury, and the state's credit rating when Jim Edgar was the governor went up for the first time in the state's history.
Thank you. Next question comes from panelist Raquel Mitchell. It's about pro-life. And each candidate will have a minute to respond, and we will start with Senator Brady.
Is it important that the eventual Republican nominee be pro-life? Yes or no? Please explain your position.
I believe it is. I had the privilege of leading our ticket in the last election. And when I had that privilege, I believe that I proved to be the most conservative ticket the state had ever seen. Maria Rodriguez and I think even expand further upon that. If you're going to win as a Republican in a Democratic-controlled state, you got to really be able to bring your party together. And it means not just being fiscally conservative, it means being socially conservative. We got to bring all the Republicans together, and that's what we did in the last election. And we made some mistakes we could clarify and learn from. But if you shy away from what you believe in, just to try to win elections, you're going to lose your base of support. And when I led the ticket, unlike the last presidential election where we lost our base of support, when I led the ticket, we won 6 seats in the Illinois House, 3 congressional seats, and 2 seats in the Illinois Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the path to victory. In the last election, we lost seats across the board. We have to have candidates who will stand for the values of the Republican Party, because that's the only way we're going to earn the trust and the vote of the citizens of Illinois.
Thank you. Senator Dillard.
Thank you. I agree with Senator Brady. I am a pro-life legislator, was the sponsor of what Dave Smith will call the real parental notice of abortion law in the state of Illinois. I believe it's a basic tenet of where you're at on different issues. There's a gentleman back here that I spoke with and had the honor of meeting before I came up to the stage tonight. Korean War veteran. I thanked him for his service, and he said, you know, where are you on the issue of pro-life? And I said, you know, that's just a basic tenet of value that goes to the person's heart, soul, and their own way they conduct their life. And it's a basic tenet, and I am proud to have cast my vote all the time to be a pro-life legislator. And again, I think it goes right to the core values.
I too am a pro-life candidate, and I have a voting record to back it up. But no, I don't think that the essential criteria to be governor of the state of Illinois is to be pro-life. Now, in my case, I hope that they're right that it is, because I am. I also just have to say, because I say this with respect, the reason we won races in 2010 in the congressional and legislative, and then lost races in the presidential 2012, had nothing to do with who the candidate for governor or president of the United States was. It had everything to do how the Democrats redrew the legislative and congressional maps that we finally had to run under in 2012.
No one's surprised that is drawn a rebuttal from Senator Brady. Senator Brady, I'll give you 30 seconds.
Thank you. With all due respect, Treasurer Rutherford, that's not right. In fact, the Democrats couldn't draw a map that had a majority of the congressional seats, Senate seats, or House seats that I didn't beat Pat Quinn in. So if you go back and look at the best computers they had in the world, I beat Pat Quinn in the majority of the House seats, the Senate seats, and the congressional seats. We had the basic support. We just didn't turn out our vote. And it wasn't because of Barack Obama. As I traveled around the state, people just were disenchanted by our opportunities. We need a candidate that will give them the opportunity they believe in.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Now we're going to go to candidate-specific questions. So each panelist will ask an individual candidate a specific question that's directed only to them. The other candidates are free to weigh in after the candidate to whom the question is directed answers. The first question will be asked by Margie, directed to Senator Dillard, and Senator Dillard, you'll have 2 minutes to respond.
One of your opponents has made union bosses and their muscle in Illinois public policy a dominant issue. In 2010, your campaign took in $250,000 from a teachers union, and your current campaign has taken in thousands of dollars from union PACs. Why do public sector unions financially support you, and how does your position on public sector unions differ from your opponents?
Well, first of all, you said it was 2010 that the teachers gave me that money. Haven't seen it yet, and don't know if it's coming. You know, I stated that my father was a high school teacher. I quite frankly think the IEA thought I was going to win the primary then. You know, I listen to teachers and I respect them. In fact, a gentleman who's a teacher, a conservative teacher, came up, saw me down here and said, you know what, about a third of the public school teachers in this state might be Republican. I've taken money from the operating engineers, that's a private union, and they're concerned and they support me because they believe that I'm the best candidate as governor to create private sector jobs in the state of Illinois and employ their workers. You know, the operating engineers have helped Republicans. In fact, the head of that union has told me he believes about half of his membership might be Republican primary voters. So, you know, the public sector unions are one thing, private sector another. You always have to divide the two. But, you know, I listen to teachers. I respect them. They are professionals in my eyes, like lawyers and doctors and accountants. And we'll see whether or not I have the respect or the endorsements of, you know, any teachers unions this time around. But I will certainly, depending on the union, certainly welcome private sector union support. Thank you.
Anybody else want to get in on this? No? Resisting temptation. Okay. The next question comes from panelist Steve Ballage. It's directed to Treasurer Rutherford. Again, candidate-specific question, and Treasurer Rutherford will have 2 minutes to respond.
While our state wrestles with debt and deficits, and public sector workers are enjoying better salaries and better benefits than their private sector counterparts who finance those salaries and benefits, the Better Government Association reported that you, as state treasurer, gave annual pay hikes ranging from $1,824 to $23,808 to 19 exempt employees, meaning they are non-union and not subject to political hiring restrictions. How do you square this with being a fiscal conservative committed to reducing state spending?
Well, I'll tell you that Andy Shaw and I had a very direct conversation after he wrote that story, because there were 19 people that did not get salary increases for their positions. What I did as the treasurer of Illinois is we had vacancies and we consolidated. So, for example, Roxy Hollenstein, who was the assistant or deputy director of the unclaimed property division, who'd been under treasurers prior to Rutherford, was promoted to become the director of unclaimed property. That was one of the 19. John Webb, who was a deputy or assistant director of legislative affairs way back under Judy Bar Topinka, under Alexi Giannoulis, and then Dan Rutherford, I promoted him to be the director of legislative affairs. Those were not salary increases. Those were promotions for people primarily from within that had been doing exemplary jobs. That I said, rather than be an assistant or deputy from the outside to be director, bringing in people from the outside, I promoted from within. I think that's a good steward of people that are doing a good job for the people of Illinois. Now, let me go ahead and add one more thing. I've been treasurer now about 3 years. My first fiscal year in office, I cut my general revenue budget by 2%. My second full fiscal year in office, I cut an additional 3%. I just got done meeting with my staff. We're going to be coming in under this new third fiscal year. I'm cutting my an additional 5%. As treasurer of the state of Illinois, I'm a constitutional officer that understands good stewardship. And in less than 4 years in office, I've cut my budget by 10% while maintaining exemplary standards of performance. Bright Start 529, we will be announcing shortly, has just brought in has reached $6 billion in assets, the highest it's ever been in history, and we have returned more money under the iCash Unclaimed Property Program from any treasurer since the dawn of time. That, my friend, is how you take a government operation, you cut expenses, you promote talented individuals, and provide exemplary service.
Okay, the next question comes from panelist Raquel Mitchell. It is for Senator Brady. Again, candidate-specific question, and Senator Brady, you'll have 2 minutes to respond.
Because of your success in the 2010 Illinois GOP gubernatorial primary, your name ID in Illinois is high, a valuable resource for your campaign. During your 2010 bid for governor, the Republican Governors Association came in to assist financially creating more name ID. Yet you lost to Governor Pat Quinn. You say you learned lessons that will help you win in 2014, but you have a small volunteer campaign staff that includes many of the same people that led your failed 2010 campaign. Tell us 3 lessons you learned in 2010 and how those lessons could help you win in 2014.
Well, first of all, it's the same staff that helped me win the primary in 2010, and they're some of the best people around. You know, what I'll tell you is money doesn't buy primaries. I was outspent 7-1 in that last election and outspent 4-1 by my next most funded competitor. We won through the grassroots, which is how we're going to win this election. But I will tell you, we've learned a lot in that election. In fact, I learned that you can't spend enough time in Cook and the Collar counties between the primary with 155,000 votes and the general election where you need 1.9 million. One of the reasons I'm running is I think I'm the only one, if not the best suited, if not the only one, who can actually win this election against Pat Quinn. It's a 40% Democratic state. Pat Quinn was in a honeymoon period. I started from scratch relatively. All the other candidates, when it comes to running for governor, and I know Treasurer Dillard would say he got more votes than Pat Quinn, but it's a big difference when you're running for the top spot. He knows when he was challenged by Secretary White, it was a little different outcome. When you're running for the top spot, and they're throwing $5 million in negative ads against you from the Democratic Governors Association, and you're not well known, it's hard sometimes to overcome that. But we build a base of support. I'm the only one who's got 1.8 million people who've already voted for me. We've earned their trust. Whoever comes out of this primary will likely come out of it with fewer than 200,000 votes. We've got the base of support to build on. I was a local state Senate candidate back then. Now I'm a statewide candidate. We've got the base to build on. We learned some things, not to let the other opponents define us, to make sure that we leave no stone unturned, and to make sure we build our base. In the 98 counties I won, we got 47% turnout. In Cook County, there was a 50% turnout. We need 2 things. One is we need to win Cook County, which we've got a path to do. And 2 is we need to make sure that 98 counties I won have a 50% turnout. That's our path to victory, building on that base.
Treasurer Rutherford wants to offer...
Well, I actually hadn't planned on it, so my name was used in debate. So Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker.
There you go.
I'm the only Republican running for governor of the state of Illinois that's actually been able to win a statewide race. Number one. Number two, when you got 4 people on the ballot, a Democrat, a Republican, a Green, and a Libertarian, and one of those 4 gets 50% of the vote, that's pretty good. I did that as down-ballot state treasurer for an office we're not supposed to win as a Republican. I got 66,000 more votes in Illinois than Pat Quinn got winning, with 83,000 less people participating in the race for treasurer. I got 22% of the city of Chicago. You don't win a statewide race unless you get 20. I got 22. Our nominee got 18. I won, he lost. I can beat Pat Quinn. I've proven it before.
Senator Dillard,
all right, my electability moment. At the close of the 2010 primary, the Chicago Sun-Times said that the highlight of the 2010 primary for governor was the candidacy of State Senator Kirk Dillard. And if the Republican Party ever wished to become the majority party again in Illinois, it needs to follow the Dillard template. The Dillard template they were talking about is a suburbanite with strong downstate roots who will run well. And I've got a couple of townships that I've represented in Cook County where I get more than 75% of the vote. I'm a suburbanite with strong downstate roots. Jill Tracy from Quincy, that businesswoman, makes me stronger than before. And I invoked his name earlier, but both Governors Edgar and Governors Thompson, 2 guys that know how to win some statewide races, have said that I am the only candidate that can beat Pat Quinn. And then last but not least, there wasn't a pundit in the state of Illinois that didn't say if I were the candidate against Pat Quinn, you'd have another week's pay in your pocket and the state would be very different because I would be the governor.
So we're a little bit ahead of schedule because the 3 candidates have been so genteel with one another. So let me take moderator's prerogative and ask a question that's kind of ripped from the headlines of the last 48 hours. And that's about Clout in Illinois. Bruce Rauner has been accused of clouting his daughter into the prestigious magnet school, high school, Walter Payton Prep in the city. Essentially accessing through his wealth and political connections, resources to aid his daughter that other people couldn't access. He has pushed back against all 3 of you who have called into question whether or not he did use Clout, saying that all 3 of you, when you were state legislators, in the case of Treasurer Rutherford and Senator Brady and Senator Dillard, attempted to influence the admissions process for children of families in your legislative districts at the University of Illinois by writing letters of recommendation, perhaps making calls to admissions officers. So Rauner has suggested that you have used Clout as well. And so I want to get the response. I'll give you each 90 seconds to respond. This whole idea of one set of rules for the politically connected and the wealthy, and another set of rules for everyone else as it manifests in admissions to prestigious high schools or to the University of Illinois. And I'll start with Treasurer Rutherford.
I'd be delighted to go first because I remember when that whole thing came down, I couldn't believe Mr. Rauner even brought it up. In the fact that I was a state legislator and I would have some individuals in my district say I've applied at this university and I've not heard the status. I picked up the phone and called and said, what's the status for X person? And let them go ahead and communicate. No, I did not go out there and try to cloud any of my family members into any university. And that I think is a very fair thing. It's not too dissimilar if somebody calls me up and says I've got an application in to get my barber's license with the Department of Professional Regulations. I still haven't gotten it. Do you mind finding out the status? That's the kind of thing I think a legislator does.
Senator Dillard. I'm sorry, Senator Brady. Senator Brady, excuse me.
Yeah, I think it's a ridiculous analogy. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have called my office and asked if we could help them find out the status of their FOID card. Fortunately, we've got a government run amok, and sometimes legislators have to inquire about the process. But for Rauner to imply that Bill Brady, and I can only speak for myself, and these two can defend themselves, I know very well, that we would do anything to influence the admissions at the University of Illinois to put one child in front of another just because they're a constituent is ridiculous. But the fact of the matter is, I think his not understanding that just because of his position, and let me backtrack. The sad thing about this is a young lady gets dragged into it. That's the sad thing. This is by no means a reflection of his daughter. And that is the sad thing. Greg Hines started this. He did the research at Crane Chicago Business. We don't mean to bring that into it. But the way in which he's dealt with it is just the way in which he dealt with the minimum wage issue. To believe that it was the right thing to do. To believe that he would do it again. And not understanding the consequences that maybe lost someone who really needed that opportunity but couldn't pick up the phone and talk to Arnie Dumpton or couldn't make a huge contribution. The difference in not understanding the difference to me is the height of arrogance.
Thank you. Senator Dillard. They are apples to oranges comparisons. As the treasurer pointed out, University of Illinois said I made, and the Tribune reported 7 status inquiries. I've been in the legislature for a while. Mr. Rauner likes to point out 7 inquiries. One I remember vividly, my son needs to make a deposit at another university. When will I hear? Those are the kinds of calls, 7 of them. The Tribune reported in their story that Senator Dillard, when an admissions decision was made, never went back a second time. Bruce Rauner's daughter was rejected as a suburbanite to a Chicago public school. And what child today, somewhere on the west side of Chicago, is not at that school, not having the chance that Bruce Rauner's daughter would have had to go to New Trier? There's a big, big difference. His daughter was rejected. I will say that it's a pattern of perpetual pay-to-play in Mr. Rauner's personal, professional, and political career. He is the man that made Rahm Emanuel rich with $16 million worth of deals when he left the Clinton White House. Mr. Rauner has had Stuart Levine, the mastermind of the Blagojevich corruption ring, who sits in a federal penitentiary on Bruce's payroll for $25,000 a month, while Rauner hawked business from the Illinois Teacher Retirement System Board of which Mr. Levine sat. That is a massive, massive conflict of interest. Mr. Rauner, as reported by the Philadelphia Inquirer, in fact, norauner.com, go read it, will tell you the Philadelphia Inquirer says Mr. Rauner gave $300,000 to the Democrat governor of Pennsylvania and then had incredible amounts of new business come from the retirement systems of the state of Pennsylvania. So it's a pattern of pay-to-play. One rules for the rich, for the Bruce Rauners of the world, and another for regular people like you and me.
Still got a little bit of time, so let's stay on this topic, kind of generally speaking. Seems right. I mean, it seems to have brought some folks to life. But Senator Dillard, you mentioned Rahm Emanuel. He is the mayor of Chicago. He's up for re-election in 2015, so who knows what may come to pass. But for the sake of argument, let's say that he will continue to be the mayor of Chicago. How important is it for a Republican governor to have a working relationship with the mayor of Chicago and distinguish what your approach would be to Rahm Emanuel or any other mayor of Chicago as compared to the relationship you described and others have described that Bruce Rauner has with Rahm?
Great question. And I have a good relationship, a professional relationship with Mayor Emanuel, and will continue to do so as governor. Senator Brady pointed out that Senator Radonio, the leader of our caucus, Senator Resner is here. We have major issues that involve funding, infrastructure funding, school funding. And you've got to be able to tell the mayor of Chicago no from time to time. And I was the guy for Jim Edgar that had to tell Mayor Daley he wasn't going to get a land-based casino the size of 4 football fields, and I lived to tell about it. So you've got to be able to tell the mayor of Chicago no. It's a little different. Mr. Rauner has, and I just told you, he's the guy that made Rahm Emanuel rich. Rahm Emanuel wouldn't be mayor of Chicago today without Bruce Rauner, because Bruce provided the financial wherewithal for Mayor Emanuel to be the mayor today. Rahm or Bruce has described as a member by the Chicago media of Rahm Emanuel's inner circle. So there's a difference between having a professional relationship with the mayor of our state's largest city and being a member of his inner circle, or as Chicago Magazine reported, going on vacation. The Rounders and the Emanuels, God bless them, vacation together too.
Thank you. Treasurer Rutherford.
I would have a professional relationship with the mayor. I think it's important for all the people of Illinois. I don't like looking at the front page of the newspaper or listening on the news on a Monday morning during the summer to see how many black or Latino kids got shot in the city of Chicago. I think that reflects badly on every one of us in this state. It reflects badly on our opportunity to bring in economic development and jobs. I'm going to work with the mayor of Chicago on those kind of issues that I think are important for all of us. That said, Chicago deserves its fair share, but so does Chanel and Chavans. And that's the kind of governor I'm going to be. You know, I'm not going to be a parochial governor in favor of downstate against Chicago or vice versa, or a Republican against a Democrat and Democrat against a Republican. I think what Illinois is looking for today is a governor that's going to be understanding that we have to make this whole place of Illinois, including the city of Chicago, a better place for attraction of jobs, and I intend to work with the mayor to do that.
Thank you. Senator Brady?
Well, I don't intend to go fishing or hunting with Rahm Emanuel. But I do think it's important that the governor of the state has an open relationship, a dialogue with all the mayors, not just the mayor of Chicago. It's important if you're going to lead the state that you can work together. Frankly, one of the reasons I chose Maria Rodriguez as my running mate was because she's an 8-term mayor. I do happen to believe that mayors understand oftentimes better than anyone in Springfield what the local needs of the community are. Mayors are the grassroots. They're at the foot of the challenges that businesses face. And I will tell you, I want to work with the Mayor's Association on economic development, because I think they really are the ones who hear about workers' compensation complaints, unemployment insurance complaints, transportation complaints, and all the other things we need. So we need to have a good working relationship with the mayor, but we're not going to, with all the mayors, but in no way, shape, or form should we let Mayor Chicago run roughshod over the governor of the state of Illinois.
Thank you. Maybe consider going hunting with Rahm Emanuel Dick Cheney style. Staying on this topic of Rahm Emanuel, there's a substantive issue, especially since now you've described what your working relationship would be. And there is rumors afoot that pension reform, which did not come to the city of Chicago. Rahm Emanuel has a problem. He's got a $20 billion unfunded police and fire pension system. And there's a lot of talk that he is going to be coming tin cup in hand to the General Assembly asking for some kind of state support, slash bailout. What would be your response as governor to Mayor Emanuel seeking state assistance to solve the city's unfunded pension liability problem? Start with Senator Brady.
Well, there's no question it is a serious problem. We certainly don't want to see Chicago go the way of Detroit. And some financial experts would argue that it's very close. I have supported pension reform for the city of Chicago. We've actually voted for and passed pension reform for the parks and for the sanitary district. But as I told a group today, the mayor's got a long way to go. In Illinois, we were able to bring about pension reform because many of us went around the state and trumpeted the need. We convinced the voters that it had to happen. 85% of the voters believe we needed pension reform in the state of Illinois. Even many of the people who are relying on the pension systems understand the need. But the mayor hasn't really sold his argument to the citizens of Chicago. And until he goes out and sells why the city of Chicago needs pension reform, I don't think he's going to get it. He can't just come to the legislature and ask them to bail him out. He's got to put forth a platform about what meaningful pension reform is, like the sanitary district and like the park district did. He's got to work within the trenches in his own city, and then when he comes to me as governor, or maybe before that, to the legislature, we'll listen to what he's done. But he's got a lot of work to do before he should come and ask the legislature to bail him out without showing some leadership on his own part.
Thank you, Senator Dillard.
And I too have voted for pension reform for the city of Chicago. What gets lost sometimes in the discussion is we redid the pension system for the CTA drivers and mass transit drivers. Jim Riley, former head of the RTA, always goes, you guys always forget that the first real pension reform you did involved the CTA and mass transit. Senator Brady pointed out, and Mayor Emanuel's been to our caucus. Senator Radonio had him in, and he gave a good presentation to our caucus about the need for the kinds of relief that his city needs. So obviously I'm going to listen to Mayor Emanuel. I do agree with Senator Brady. He needs to go out and make his case. The city of Lombard, where my office is, their entire real estate levy is essentially today used to pay police and fire pensions. And so it's not only Mayor Emanuel, it is most municipalities and cities in the state that have issues. And I would hope that Mayor Emanuel, along with all of the mayors of the state of Illinois, would get together and bring forth a plan that begins the discussion in the state legislature to the next step on pension reform. And I guess just to close on this question, I want to just say it is time. We have some real issues in this state. And I'm going to be a governor for all of Illinois, but I know I'm standing here in one of the collar counties, Will County. And I've had the honor of representing part of Will County in the legislature, but it is time for the collar counties to have a governor that understands our unique issues, whether it's infrastructural or mass transit funding, or as Senator Brady pointed out, the unique things that deal with school finance that drive our real estate taxes up. It's time for a collar county governor, folks.
Thank you. Treasurer Rutherford. I want to answer your question, but I'm going to break it in two pieces, if I may, Dan, because if your question is with regards to working with the mayor and the mayors of other cities to look at changes in the pension system statutorily, yes, I'm open for those discussions. I think it's a healthy one to have and all at the table. If your question is, as governor, would I support subsidies to the city of Chicago for their pension system? No. I do have to beg to differ slightly, or maybe I concur with Senator Dillard. Because in regards to this Collar County business, I happen to have been a vice president of Service Master Corporation in Senator Dillard's home county of DuPage for 25 years. So I think I probably qualify as that suburban Collar County kind of guy. And having been from central Illinois my entire life, to be real candid with you, I don't think it means a hill of beans where somebody happens to grow up, if they have looked at all of Illinois, have lived in Chicago, have worked in the suburbs, have lived in central Illinois, and has been able to be elected statewide. I think there's a lot of criteria on who should be the next governor of Illinois.
Thank you. We talked a little bit about the University of Illinois before. Let me revisit the University of Illinois, but from a different issue perspective. University of Wisconsin-Madison, Indiana University, in-state tuition for residents of those two states is about 40% less than in-state tuition is for Illinois residents to go to University of Illinois. Give us your viewpoint on the cost of college education, accessing a good state school that taxpayers finance, like the University of Illinois, and what can be done to bring tuition down so that it is attainable for high-performing students who maybe don't come from a ton of means. We'll start with Treasurer Rutherford.
I appreciate you using University of Illinois as an example, but I would also like to include Illinois State University. Okay, and Western. The answer to it goes somewhat to the earlier question. I think, Steve, you asked about, reading levels in grade school. It's a business. It's a return on investment. What we have done is we are not putting resources into our state universities from our general revenue fund, and for that reason they've had to raise their tuition and make it unaffordable. The other thing we've done is we've not put in money into the math grants. So the monetary assistance programs, those funds have run out before it ever gets to the time for the students who are applying to go to community colleges. See, those are the kind of things you got to think through as a governor and what kind of a return you're going to get. And I intend to, to be a governor looking at those approaches to it.
Thank you. Senator Brady.
It is a serious problem, and the problem is when we graduate kids from high school and then they go to Wisconsin or Ohio or Missouri or other places, sometimes we don't get them back. And that means our future isn't quite as optimistic as what we would want it to be if they were staying here at Illinois universities. So it's a big problem. It's a bigger problem than what we think. I think part of it has to be an analysis of, are the universities actually cost efficient? Are they spending money at the right place? I mean, the University of Illinois is now talking about another tuition increase. I'm not sure that's right. I think it's time to take a serious look at all these universities and find out if they're efficient, if they're lean, and they're mean, particularly compared to peer universities in other states. Just accepting that they're going to pass along those costs to our students, I don't think is something we can take for granted anymore. So as governor of the state, I'm going to lead an initiative to make sure that our universities are efficient. It happened a while ago under a guy by the name of Kirk. Yes, we have underfunded our universities at the expense of some other programs that the Chicago politicians have prioritized. But we also, I think it's time, as under our Kirk, who looked at how we're going to make our university system efficient and effective, and we are going to take a look at it from top to bottom, not just the U of I, not just ISU, not just Western, but every public university. And we're also going to look at the community college system and find out what we can do to better leverage it to keep people in Illinois.
Thank you. Senator Dillard.
As the guy who has a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, and you'll be happy, Senator Rutherford, I contributed on the 30th of December towards that $6 billion Right Start account. I worry about this stuff every day, not only for my own children, but for the future of Illinois. It's in today's paper. The University of Illinois raised tuition again. It is cheaper for an in-state Illinoisan to go to the University of Kentucky than it is our own flagship university. Go to my best-in-class education program. I am the one candidate for governor, as I was last time, that's laser-focused on higher education. I serve on the foundation board of the College of DuPage. When the state doesn't make higher education a priority, real estate taxes go up in my home county of DuPage, or the tuition on the students who go to the College of DuPage go up. I stay very active and was the alumni president of Western Illinois University for a long time, and I'm very active with my other alma mater, DePaul University. The private schools are getting squeezed too. As the treasurer said, we do a lot of things right. Illinois does have a great higher education system, but the MAP grant, the Monetary Assistance Program, is just crucial, not only for the ISUs of the world, which Senator Brady so ably represents, but the DePaul universities or the Lewis University in Romeoville, right up the road. But higher ed's been neglected. It started with Rod Blagojevich, who I believe had a disdain for higher education, and we need to make it a focus again, because we are starting to really squeeze out middle-class kids and those who truly need our financial assistance. And Illinois has one of the best systems of financial aid in the country, but we've got to make it a priority. And as I said before, best-in-class education goes hand in glove with making us a destination economy for job creators.
Thank you. So this next section of the Q&A, we're going to do like a little rapid-fire section. So a lot of these are yes/no questions, or try and keep it to 15 seconds or thereabouts. Categories, some social issues. How many of you have applied or are planning to apply for your right to carry permits? Bill Brady, go ahead, Senator Brady. You have.
Not, but my wife, who's actually a better hunter than I am, my wife is going to.
Wife there to protect you, okay, that counts.
She's tougher than Kirk, you don't hunt with a concealed carry permit.
My wife, when she first met Sarah Palin, said, that's nothing. I've called deer since I was a little girl in Wisconsin. So, but the wife's applying for it.
Senator Dillard hunts with extreme prejudice. Treasurer Rutherford.
I've got my FOIA card. Unfortunately, in the heat of a campaign, I don't see that I have the time to go through the classes for concealed carry, but I intend to do that. But now that I know about Senator Dillard, I think I'm going to have Stephanie be on my executive security detail.
We'll start the other end, Treasurer Rutherford, gambling expansion, something you favor, do not favor? But both in terms of more licenses as well as more positions.
No, I do not support more licenses. The general concept and where I've been in the past is have not been supportive at all of expansion of gaming, whether it's the internet and so forth. I do think, though, that the idea of a Chicago land-based casino is probably something that would merit very judicious and blunt discussion. And if it were to be a part of the factor that I would look at as governor of the state of Illinois, is the fact that the state gaming board and not the city of Chicago would be the regulator or authority over it.
But just following up on that, if there was a Chicago land-based casino you thought made sense, would that be a new license or would that have to be from an existing license?
That is negotiated.
Okay. Senator Dillard.
Thank you. On the Chicago casino, the same position as the treasurer, and I don't agree with Pat Quinn on much, but I do agree with Governor Quinn and the way that the Chicago casino must be regulated. I have supported the agricultural components, and Senator Brady and Senator Treasurer Rutherford, as downstaters understand, and it sometimes gets lost on those of us up here. There's an agricultural component to horse racing that is very, very important to a segment of family farmers, many of them. It's historical. From one generation to another, and I've supported those kinds of changes that help the agricultural component to horse racing.
Senator Brady.
You know, I've never supported an expansion of gaming. I'm very concerned about the implications it has on our society, and I certainly don't think it's ever going to solve our financial problems. I was adamantly opposed to... adamantly opposed to video poker. I think it's going to ruin our society in many ways. Having machines on every street corner, practically in every bar, they're running them like casinos around the state. It's a problem we're going to have to deal with. And as far as the Chicago casino goes, I'm not sure I see any significance, and I certainly couldn't support it being owned by the city of Chicago.
Thank you. We'll start with Senator Dillard. Illinois' new medical marijuana law. People are concerned that, as we have seen in Colorado, you start with a medical marijuana legalization and you ultimately move to the legalization of recreational marijuana. Do you support the new Illinois medical marijuana law, and are you concerned at all about this leading to the legalization of recreational marijuana?
I voted no on medical marijuana. I mean, I take my lead on this from law enforcement agencies, and I remember a letter vividly that I received from the California Director of State Police. I voted no, and yes, again, using my 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, and as a member of the Robert Crown Center for Health Education Board, I do worry about the creep of beginning to legalize marijuana and having it go to stronger things.
Treasurer Rutherford.
I do not support the legislation that was put into law about medical marijuana.
Senator Brady.
I oppose it as well.
Moving to kind of tax and spend policy, I think we heard from Senator Brady earlier in the discussion in terms of support for repealing the personal and corporate income tax hike that took effect in 2011. Can each of you comment on whether you would move, upon election, to repeal those tax rate hikes? And we'll start with Senator Brady.
Under no circumstances would I allow the legislature to extend those increases. They must sunset. Under no circumstances would I support a progressive, we can't use that word, a graduated income tax hike. Graduated income tax hike. And as governor, I would never allow it to be implemented if it did pass constitutionally. As I said, we've got to wake up, folks. Look at states that are moving forward. There are states that don't have a personal income tax. That's got to be our goal.
Thank you, Senator Dillard.
No state has ever taxed its way to prosperity, and I have said repeatedly that we should roll back those taxes. Our caucus, Senator Radonio's down here in the front row, our caucus came out after the Democrats did pass on the last day of session that 67% income tax increase. Again, that's a week's pay for you. We delineated a plan on how you would scale that and get rid of what is allegedly a temporary tax.
Thank you. Treasurer Rutherford.
I just want to make it real clear. I don't want it to stay. I don't want it to stay. I don't want it to stay. Everybody clear now? And the reason I'm doing this is because I know those video cameras are back there and somebody's going to take a little segment out of here and they're going to spin it on YouTube and all of a sudden it's going to be different than I don't want it to stay. When I'm governor in January 2015, will this state public pension bill be found constitutional or not? Okay? Will Quinn and Madigan and Cullerton put their spending back together? I'm going to have the ability to negotiate, and part of it may be some kind of revenue. I think where Quinn screwed it up was January 2011 because all he did was raise money and didn't resolve the financial problem of Illinois. I don't want it to stay, and put that in the video when you clip out those certain segments.
Thank you. Any differing opinion in terms of approach from Treasurer Rutherford? Senator Brady?
Well, again, it comes back to building the base. I think we need a candidate who's firm on this conviction. We don't have a revenue problem, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a spending problem. If we want to bring more revenue in, we've got to have jobs associated with it. We're not going to get them if we keep taxing and spending the people of Illinois to death.
I think, as I said in my opening answer, we must have a panel that is put together of business leaders, financial leaders, to take a top and to bottom overhaul of our tax structure in this state. Representative Tracy, my running mate, a businesswoman from Quincy, is going to be very instrumental in that. You know, Jill, every morning when she wakes up in Quincy, looks across the river to Hannibal, Missouri, and her business competes in all 50 states, but hardly in the Midwest. But we have a tax code and system in this state that is archaic, and we need a top-to-bottom look at every tax, every fee, and every regulation on business and individuals in the state of Illinois.
Thank you. That tax increase that we've been discussing was passed with the predicate that was going to pay down unpaid bills to state vendors and social service providers, yet since its passage, the amount of unpaid bills to vendors and social service providers has actually gone up. Will you commit to achieving in your first 2 years in office as governor that you will pay down the unpaid bills, the monies owed to state vendors and social service providers? Senator Brady.
Yes, in fact, I've committed to bringing them current in no less than 4 years, but setting aside at least 1/4 of the unpaid bills built into the budget to pay those off in no less than 4 years.
Senator Dillard.
Been there, done that before. Inherited $1 billion deficit as Governor Edgar's chief of staff, and we left $1.5 billion in the state treasury without an income tax increase. And we whittled down the state's payment cycle to 17 days. Credit rating went up, unemployment rate, what a surprise, right? When you have a state government that lives within its means, our unemployment rate was below the national average. Why wouldn't you want that kind of government again? Almost all the time with a Democrat General Assembly.
Thank you. Treasurer Rutherford.
Well, with all respect, Governor Edgar is the one that signed the temporary income tax increase in to become a permanent income tax increase. Now, you asked if I'm going to get it down, will I commit to that? What I'm going to commit to is I'm going to try. And I'm being honest with you. What's going to happen to the economy of the United States of America? What's going to happen with regards to the state public pension issue? What's going to happen on this Obamacare that we are now going to have to absorb? I think any politician that goes out there and says, yep, that's what I'm going to do, without giving you the condition to understand that there's a lot of things that are going to be surrounding it for them to be able to adhere to that. I'm going to try.
Thank you. On the spending is the problem. Spending is the problem issue. Will you support statutory spending caps that would limit state spending growth year over year to no more than inflation plus population growth? Treasurer Rutherford.
I need to see what it looks like. I mean, the idea is spending growth. Yes, conceptually I'm for that. But I think a better approach to it, Dan, is do like I did as State Treasurer of Illinois. First fiscal year, you cut your budget by 2%. Second fiscal year, you cut your budget by 3%. Third fiscal year, you cut your budget by 5%. And you maintain exceedingly high standards of performance. If I can do it in my small treasurer's office, you give me a shot at the big state agencies.
Thank you. Senator Brady.
Yeah, this isn't just about the president, it's about the future. Years ago, I sponsored a constitutional amendment which was similar to what they did in Colorado called TABOR, Taxpayer Accountability, limits the rate of government spending to inflation and population growth. We need to constrict the hands of all of our politicians, be it today or in the future. And as governor, I want to leave a legacy. I want to leave a legacy that will tie the hands of future governors, regardless of who we elect, so they can't do what Rod Blagojevich and Pat Quinn have done to this state. Absolutely, we need barometers put in place, like TABOR, that restrict spending limits.
Senator Dillard, thank you.
Thank you. One of the cornerstones of why I'm running for governor, and I said it in my first answer, I want a constitutional amendment if you want one game changer in state government that requires the legislature to pass a balanced budget or they don't get paid. I've been there. I've downsized the state government as a governor's chief of staff with a Democratic legislature. Just to clarify, and I understand where Senator Rutherford, Treasurer Rutherford is coming from, but Governor Ed, the income tax was the same on the day he left office as the day he was sworn in as governor. He campaigned before the election for continuing to have the income tax at the current level. So when I say we did it all without an income tax increase, that is correct. The income tax was the same when Jim Edgar began his governorship as when he left it. And we left $1.5 billion in the state treasury, but most importantly, the unemployment rate in Illinois was below the national average. That's something that hasn't really happened much in my adult lifetime.
Thank you. Is there a rebuttal? Senator Brady.
Not to pile on Governor Edgar, but he was also one of the governors who didn't make GASB pension funding payments that left us with the problem we have today. It's easy to balance the budget and have more money in the bank if you don't meet the pension obligations. So that's a major problem that we're now dealing with. Senator Dillard, just out of curiosity, and I like your idea of saying we're not paying legislators unless they balance the budget, but it really is up to the governor to balance the budget. The legislature passes a budget. It's then up to the governor to balance the budget. And by the way, you won't know if that budget was balanced until the Auditor General does a report 2 or 3 years later. So I don't know how that works. I'm curious as to how you play that out.
You know, you can tell if you have a balanced budget, and you will have a statutory method to do that, fiscal years overlap, but there is a way to do it. Other states have balanced budgets. This state of Illinois, and like Senator Brady, I haven't voted for a state budget, so I'm not the problem here. I believe I'm the solution. I'm tested and I'm prepared, but I haven't voted for these Democrat budgets because they're out of balance. I don't like their priorities. We've really had no discussion tonight on the state's largest expenditure, which is Medicaid. We spend more on Medicaid than we do on education in the state of Illinois. It's not my priority. We had a question earlier on higher education. That's one of the reasons we don't have money to fund the University of Illinois, because Medicaid is out of control. I've been there. I've controlled Medicaid spending through innovative programs before. And then last but not least, Governor Edgar was the first governor in the state's history, and he had a ramp-up program, and yeah, maybe the ramp-up wasn't, and he said when he signed the bill, you got to look at it every year. But like an alcoholic, Jim Edgar, and I was in the Senate by this time, said, you know, we got to have a ramp. We got a pension problem that's coming. And at least he was the first one that said, we got to have a ramp-up to pay off this pension problem.
Thank you. Let's move to quick questions again on job climate in the state. Start with Senator Dillard. Michigan. State of Michigan passed right-to-work legislation last year, signed by Governor Snyder. If right-to-work legislation made it to the governor's desk, is that something you would sign?
You know, in Michigan, they had a Republican Senate and a Republican House. Senator Oberweis, Senator Rezin, myself, Senator Radonio, we're sitting in the largest Democrat-dominated state Senate and legislature in the history of Illinois. They did it in Michigan. They actually had to bring Governor Snyder sort of along, and they had a Republican House and a Republican Senate. Right to work under the current change or the current regime in Springfield is not going to happen. We need changes in our workers' compensation system. We need to focus on our taxation and regulatory system and focus on things that really will help us improve our economy. And right to work is not going to happen when Bill and I are sitting in a legislature or a state senate that's 40 Democrats and 19 Republicans.
Well, let's just say, for hypothetical purposes, that 5.5 million people in Cook County had an epiphany overnight, decided to vote differently and elect different people to the General Assembly, and all of a sudden, Senator Radonio was Senate President Radonio, and Leader Durkin was Speaker Durkin, and legislation made it to your desk, maybe towards the end of your first term, that would install right to work. Would you sign it or not?
Depends what it looks like, but I doubt it.
Okay. Treasurer Rutherford, same question.
I don't see an epiphany coming, the answer is no.
No on right to work. Senator Brady.
Yeah, Dan, I know where you're going, and a lot of us like this, but I think the truth of the matter is, I don't see it happening. But I don't think that's the save all to everything. Frankly, if you look at recent case law, there's been a lot of dwindling away of right to work. I think there's a lot we could do with existing case law as it relates to it to level the playing field, and that's what I'd be about.
Thank you. Other policies that have been employed to try and attract and retain businesses, most particularly special tax treatment for major employers who are politically powerful. I'm thinking, of course, of Sears and CME and Motorola Mobility and others that got special deals after the 2011 tax increase. Do you favor conferring those kind of special tax treatments to significant employers? And if you do, how do you explain that to small business owner operators who are paying full freight? Start with Senator Brady.
Well, this is the problem when you overtax. That's why I want to eliminate the personal income tax. We've had the highest corporate income tax in the nation, one of the highest personal income taxes in the nation. When you do that, people start making decisions away from your state, and you start getting threatened, and you start getting on the defensive. We need to make sure that we get off the defense and in the offensive. I will tell you that other governors are using those tools, so it's something called the edge tax credit. But as governor, I don't want to provide incentives unless it's a win-win. In business, I know when I lose a customer, it's awfully hard to get that customer back. So we work very hard to keep our customers, which is why we need to work hard to keep our businesses. We don't want to lose them. So we've got to be very aggressive in making sure we're providing a platform and a playing field for them to stay here. But I wouldn't want to give up the tools to compete with other states who are trying to attract jobs. But it's got to be a win-win. It's got to be a position where we're gaining more than we're losing in the short term. In the long term, we're gaining everything.
Senator Dillard.
Thank you. All those CEOs of those big old companies, those are those big $250,000 donors. They're dollar donors to the guy who's not here in the chair.
Don't point to me.
I said not here in the chair.
Although I'd be happy to take those contributions.
And I will point out that those big old corporations and those CEOs that write those $250,000 and $500,000 checks are special interests because they certainly have a huge stake personally as well as their corporations in the state of Illinois. So they're special interests just like the IEA and teachers unions and senior citizens. I look forward to a state of Illinois where we don't have to offer an incentive to anyone. This is the capital of the Midwest, folks. Nobody has O'Hare Airport or McCormick Place, and I sponsored the law. Senator Radonio was instrumental. I give Speaker Madigan credit. I was the Senate sponsor of the work rule changes that kept McCormick Place, the #1 convention center in the United States, taking on some very tough unions to tell them they can't kill the goose that laid the golden egg. Nobody produces more beans or corn than the state of Illinois. Nobody has great institutions, Northwestern, University of Chicago, DePaul, Eureka College, you name it, Lewis University. Nobody has what the state of Illinois has, including the best rail system in the country, and our location, which is second to none in fresh water. So to be rated 50th in economic outlook is unacceptable, and I want to reform through my destination economy plan. I want to make Illinois a place where no business needs to have an incentive to stay here or grow here. They all ought to want to come here because of our environment and our location.
Treasurer Rutherford. I want to explain to you how I think and how I'm going to act as your governor. The idea of the EDGE tax credit. I want CME to stay here. I want Sears to stay here. I want ADM to stay here. I want every one of them to stay here. But if you're going to go in, you're going to have special legislation because somebody's got some political clout and a good lobbyist. As the governor of Illinois, when you do something like that, you have winners and you have losers. If we're about to change the law for EDGE tax credit to go away from your corporate taxes and put it to your payroll taxes, if it's good enough for them, make it good enough for everybody else. Make it a level playing field for everybody to participate. Another thing is, when you hear these people talk about these tax loopholes, well, that's the buzzword saying they want to get rid of them. I look at them as tax incentives, and I intend to put together an objective analysis. We have a manufacturer's tax credit, motion picture tax credit, printer's tax credit, research and development tax credit, and every one of those, I believe, deserves a fair analysis if they give a better return than what their expense is. If they do, I'm going to go to the House Revenue Committee and the Senate Revenue Committee and justify and defend them. And if they don't, I'll be the governor with an objective analysis, not subjective, to suggest they're gotten rid of. I think that's an appropriate way that you run from a private sector businessman standpoint on what you look at in your Illinois government.
Thank you. The penultimate question, still a quick answer. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Brady.
You know, one of the things that bothers me the most about this recent ADM thing, you know, when it came to Chicago metropolitan area businesses, Governor Quinn and Madigan and Culleton, there was full cooperation. But when it came to a Decatur, Illinois business, a business that is rooted in our agricultural base, the largest public sector traded agricultural company in the world, Chicago politicians turned a blind eye. Ladies and gentlemen, this was a program that was designed to bring over 500 additional jobs to Decatur, over and above the jobs that were going to be moved to Chicago. This was a win-win, which is why we need a governor for all of Illinois. We can't continue to be under this tyranny of Chicago control. And if it's in Chicago's interest, it's good, but not the rest of the state of Illinois.
Thank you. The penultimate question, still quick. This isn't fair because it's a complicated issue, but life isn't fair, so we'll deal with it. And that is the human cost of bad public policy. Specifically, a recent HHS study that finds that Illinois is 51st out of 50, behind even the District of Columbia when it comes to providing services for the developmentally disabled. Senator Dillard, first to you. What one thing could you do immediately as governor to improve civilization in Illinois by making sure that those who need state services through no fault of their own and who we all believe should be provided those state services get those state services?
Thank you, and I commend Dan Proft, who throughout the last campaign for governor and every time I see him speak, always says it is shameful as the state of Illinois, as rich as we are in resources and human heart, to literally be last in America on what we spend per capita on the developmentally disabled. I mean, Dan, the place I go looking for that money, aside from growing the economy, is to manage the Medicaid program of this state better. We must throw off people, and there are studies down in Bill's area, the CBS station in Champaign, said that perhaps up to half of the people on Medicaid in Illinois are not eligible. We've had studies that have shown we have tens of thousands of people that don't even live in the state of Illinois who are on that program. So I've got to manage Medicaid, our state's largest expenditure, better, so that those who truly need it, whether it's a single mom who needs Medicaid for her children, or a senior citizen, or the developmentally disabled, it's all a matter of prioritization, Dan. I'll tell you, it's like your question on pro-life. This one goes right to your heart. My office mate is Representative Patty Belloc, who is without a doubt the heart and conscience of most of the Republican members with respect to the developmentally disabled.
Thank you. Treasurer Rutherford.
As you recall the question we had in regards to higher ed, I said that that's going to also be a part of a discussion for developmentally disabled, the mental illness, and drug abuse, and substance abuse. You know, this is a part of a discussion and an array of issues that I'm going to have to deal with as your governor. I concur, Senator Dillard, that I think that one of the areas that I can do as your governor is to be able to address the Medicaid. I think that is the one area that we can really get our hands around. I know there's been attempts to do that. And then the other is in regards to looking at the returns that we get. I mean, we look at certain state institutions, and we look at community-based assistance. And I know that there's a dynamic debate that goes on there, but where is the best place for individuals and the returns for the taxpayers? And I think those are the kind of things that we need to start to analyze.
Thank you. Senator Brady.
Well, the first thing we have to do is assess the needs. And unfortunately, this governor manages this issue by press release and fiat rather than assessing the needs. I've talked to people who work in state institutions, and I've talked to people who give in community care. Those are the folks we need to be talking to assess the needs. We need to make sure that the balance of resources between state institutions and community care is right. There's some great advancements in ability to care for more people by moving into the community, but there are some people who just can't survive in a community setting and need institutional care. So we've got to assess that. Yeah, we can do some things with better managing our Medicaid, and that's got to be our highest priority. But frankly, to really meet this need, it gets back to jobs. We have to create an economy that's churning revenues so we have the resources that we can dedicate to those of our most needy.
Thank you. Final question of the evening. Give everybody a couple minutes on this, and thank everyone in the audience for your patience, but I think this has been quite illuminating. The final question. Bruce Rauner, who is not here, is spending millions of dollars on television ads to frame the race in the following way. He is a political outsider and successful businessman whose success allows him to be independent, while you three are 20-year career politicians who've had your chance and haven't gotten the job done. How do you respond to that characterization, number one? And number two, as three longtime elected officials, how do you distinguish yourselves from one another? Treasurer Rutherford.
Well, to start with, I find that the opportunity I had to serve as a citizen legislator, I didn't go as a career legislator, to be an advantage for me as your governor. It gives me the opportunity to understand the process, know the personalities, and realize the dynamics of negotiation, not just from the private sector like I have in my company, being a private sector business guy, but also how you need to negotiate a consensus in government. With regards to Mr. Rauner and his ability to raise the monies, gosh darn it, bless you. But I think when it really gets down to it, the public of Illinois, the Republican primary voter of Illinois is going to be looking for someone that they know. Someone that has not showed up at the state fair for Republican Day the first time because they're running for governor. It's going to be someone that's been able to be, having been at Troy Township or in Shorewood, and campaign for candidates for county board and city office and Congress, state rep and Senate. It's going to be someone that's actually spoken at the Lincoln Day dinners for years and years and not just showing up for the first time because they're going to run for governor. I think the Republican primary voter is going to be looking for someone who is out there campaigning for candidates and that isn't just looking to go out and buy straw polls. I think the Republican primary voter is going to look at someone who could go through the finish line. Here, this is going to be a big decision we're making for this March 18th. Who's going to be able to go through the finish line with Pat Quinn on that date in November? When you take the public policy poll that came out around Thanksgiving, I'm the only Republican running that actually beats Pat Quinn. I'm the only one running that beats Pat Quinn. Now, I don't have the resources of the gentleman that's not here, but I do have resources in our campaign committee. I don't have any debt. We have brought it in, And I know this is a close, so I've got to do it just like any good business good guy, and especially a good politician. I'm looking you in the eye. I'm asking if you please consider to vote for me to be your Republican nominee for governor. I'm the guy that can win this race. And thank you for being out here with us tonight.
Thank you. Senator Brady.
Well, in spite of what Bruce Rauner says, I'm proud of my commitment to public service. I spent the last 20 years serving the people in the Central Illinois area, and I'm also a citizen legislator. Yes, I've been in the private sector and made some money. Didn't make $1 billion because some of my time went to serving my constituents. But I'm proud of that. But I also think that's the experience that puts me in the best position to serve the people of Illinois. We need someone who's got both business, practical experience, and someone who's got the legislative experience to get the job done. You know, I'm also the only candidate here who's been vetted. I know what it's like to have the Chicago Tribune investigate every business transaction you've been involved in over a 3-month period over the last 20 years of your life. I know what it's like to have the Democratic Governors Association make those same investigations. I'm the only candidate here who's been vetted, and we've seen in this last week what it's like when you've got a candidate who has not been vetted. Whether it be a huge misflap on the minimum wage, I can't tell you how many times I've had to defend that Republicans don't stand for taking $2,000 a year out of the pockets of hardworking Illinois families. Or whether it be a Clout incident that may come up. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what you're going to get with Bill Brady, and so do the voters. I received 1.8 million votes in one of the most highly contested gubernatorial races in this nation as a relatively unknown candidate. I'm the only one who's got the base of support who could start from there and go on to win this election. Frankly, I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe in my heart that I'm the best chance, if not the only chance we've got of beating Pat Quinn. So I too am here today to ask for your support. Many of you are already volunteering for my campaign, and I thank you. Many of you, if not all of you, already supported me in the last election. I'm asking you to do what you can to make sure we win this one. Money doesn't buy victory. Issues, true conservative values, and the ability to communicate with people buys victory. And that's why we're going to win next November. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you. Senator Dillard.
None of the three of us up here are going to be able to take as much special interest or out-of-state money as Mr. Rauner. And I do find it ironic. I went and looked today at the career of Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin, a career politician, member of the legislature for a number of years in Wisconsin, the Milwaukee County executive, and now the governor of Wisconsin, a career politician. Mitch Daniels, governor of Indiana, a friend of mine who I've spent time with, had governmental experience at different levels. My theme tonight, I think you've heard it, I'm tested and I'm prepared. I've been there, inherited $1 billion deficit, $1.5 billion surplus. Wall Street credit rating was going up in administrations that I was involved in, unemployment rate below the national average, and one other really important thing, because I think most of you are Republicans here tonight. At the end of my time as Governor Edwards' chief of staff, we didn't need term limits to make a guy named Mike Madigan the minority leader. We did it through good, sound policy, and Lee Daniels, a Republican from Elmhurst, became the Speaker of the Illinois House. We'll tell you, this is a great state, folks, and we are the capital of the Midwest. If you want to win this election, take Governor Edgar, take Governor Thompson's word for it, take most of the pundits. I'm the one person that can beat, with my running mate, Jill Tracy, Pat Quinn. We haven't mentioned Paul Vallis, the lieutenant governor candidate selection of Governor Quinn. A wise selection, I think, politically for Governor Quinn. But I am a good antidote as a suburban Collier County guy to Paul Vallis, who will appeal to many of the kinds of voters that Senator Radonio or I represent in our suburban districts. Last but not least, and whether it's one of these two guys, and they are great friends of mine, both of them. Nobody worked harder for Bill Brady other than his family than Kirk Dillard did after Bill was our nominee last time. But we do need geographic balance in this state. I do believe, and I'm going to be a governor for all of Illinois. Bill, I announced my candidacy in Decatur, Illinois, where my wife's ancestral home is, so I care greatly about all regions of Illinois. But if Governor Quinn and Paul Vallis and a man named Bruce Rauner, since Dan asked the question, are that team that leads the executive branch in Illinois, all four legislative leaders, Republican and Democrat, live in a county called Cook. We need representation in Illinois. Balance in our thought process, balance in school funding, Metro funding, mass transit funding, infrastructure funding. We need somebody other than from Cook County to be the chief executive of the state of Illinois. So I'm tested and I'm prepared. I need your vote. I look forward. I don't look backward with a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. Every day, this state, and the reason that I'm running is I am so disgusted with the Chicago Democrats who have pile-driven the economy of the state of Illinois into the ground, along with the reputation of a state that I have grown up in and love and want my children to be here to live in, like I want you and your grandchildren and children to be here as well. Thank you so much for being here, and appreciate it. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for coming out and hearing this wide-ranging discussion. Let's please give another round of applause to both our panelists as well as these three gentlemen. A reminder before you leave, we are doing a straw poll. The organizers are doing a straw poll. You've all received these ballots. You can drop them off at the exits. They'll be counted tonight. They'll be posted on IllinoisReview.com tomorrow. Thank you very much. Good night. 8 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you very much.